Hello everybody, this is Keach Rainwater, your guest mentor today for Studio NPL. And today I've got a piece of equipment here, a really nice old 16mm camera. We're not even going to talk about that today. What we're going to talk about is the second unit. And so what that is like when you watch a big film, a big Hollywood film, and you see the actor in there, like say Harrison Ford or something, you know, acting and doing his thing, and then they cut to a close-up of him maybe pulling out his bullwhip or something like that, a close-up where you don't really see his face or anything. If they had to set the camera up and do that, like while Harrison Ford was there, it would be like hours and hours and hours of just standing around resetting the camera. They don't want to have to do that to the actor, so they set up what's called a second unit. And that is a whole nother production team. It's almost a whole nother movie production, but in the same movie, but it's a whole nother location and a whole nother director and a whole nother set of cameras and all that stuff, just to match those close-up shots that they didn't want to waste time with when they had the actor there. So it's a very important thing, you know, and a lot of famous directors have started out being a second unit director. And if you watch the credits of a movie roll and you notice on there, second unit director, second unit cinematographer, whatever, you'll notice that there's a lot of people involved in the second unit. And it's a very, very important part of filmmaking that you should definitely look into and appreciate. Next time you watch a movie and you see a close-up of something, somebody dropping something on the ground and picking up something that's a close-up, that normally was done, if it was a big budget movie, it was normally done with what they call the second unit. And so, you know, next time you watch a big movie, look where it says the second unit and see how many people are involved in that and how many different jobs there are for a second unit in a big movie. And I'm Keach Rainwater, your guest mentor for Studio NPL, and we'll see you next time.
Video production at Studio NPL. Learn how to capture, edit, and create your own videos. Part of the Studio NPL Teen Workshop Series.
Hey everybody, Ashley here. I am the sewing mentor at Studio NPL, and I just wanted to share with you a little bit about a book that I found right off the shelf at the main public library of Nashville, and that is the Liberty Book of Home Sewing. It's a pretty cool project book, and it perfectly melds aesthetically pleasing designs with projects that you can make at home with practicing basic sewing skills so that you can intertwine all of these things and really work on forming your own designs and executing them as you go. For a little bit of background, and the beginning of the book gives a little foreword after a few really cool patterns. This is what Liberty's known for. They create fabric and they've been designing these patterns for over 100 years now. So it gives a little bit of historical background, which is really fascinating. And basically, there was a Brit named Arthur Lazenby Liberty, and he began importing high-quality textiles and other goods from China, India, and Japan back in the 1800s, so about 1875. And he created his shop, Liberty of London, on the famous Regent Street in London. So the store did very well. And eventually he began designing block prints for fabrics to be made out of vegetable dyes, which were being engineered at the time. So from turn of the century until now, Liberty of London has been creating eye-catching, eclectic fabric prints inspired by botany, geometry, and even music by popular artists. These prints are sprinkled throughout this book, and they can really get your imagination going. Like this one. This one's inspired by Jimi Hendrix. It's pretty cool. Now, as a sewing book, this focuses on how to utilize basic techniques while working on a project. And while it does have a section in the back detailing these techniques, which it'll give you a little bit more background on what you use them for and how, it does not read like a reference book. So be aware of that. It may help to have a little bit of sewing knowledge to get going or to have access to someone who does and likes to share about it. Also, the internet is very helpful to look up techniques in a very quick way and find them on YouTube. So when it comes to projects in the book, there are a wide variety to choose from. So a lot of them are home goods, so anything like pillows or curtains or a keepsake board for photos or mementos, or even a bean bag, which is pretty cool. You can also do accessories like shopping bags or a floral corsage, or even in terms of clothing, you can make a kimono or a robe. It also features two types of quilts that use traditional and more modern methods for construction, including hand sewing. It may take some time, but it will look really good. Now, oftentimes, sewing project books like this will include patterns in the back of the book or a CD. Yet this one details how to create the patterns yourself via simple shapes that you can measure out at home on paper or on cardboard. This part does take practice and takes a while to get used to, but it is so worth the time to learn. And once you have created these patterns, you can adapt these patterns as you complete the projects and know what you're looking for and change them accordingly and make them really more like what you need. And also, if you've ever tried to use a home sewing pattern, you may have experienced how confusing only following text can be when it comes to learning a new tactile skill. Very confusing. This book does a really great job of showing the steps for each project with illustrations, and these can really help you stay on track versus just following the text on a page. My favorite part of this book are the fabric prints themselves. Throughout the pages, you see a lot of really cool patterns being used in a variety of ways, and in the back of the book, there is this fabric glossary. This is pretty cool. You don't see it very often, and it's very characteristic of Liberty of London since they've been creating patterns for over 100 years now. This lists each fabric and gives some info on when it was originally designed, how it was used, and including the page number of where it is in the book. This is such a really cool feature that taps into the archives of this brand's designs and gives you more information on the designers, what the inspiration was, and more of that. So overall, the Liberty Book of Home Sewing is equal parts visually pleasing, inspiring, and great for getting to know sewing better while practicing designing your own personal projects. You can check this out through the library and pick it up through the current curbside service. Check it out. Happy sewing and reading.
Okay. Now, thank you everyone for participating today in our Zoom call. And we're calling it, Are You Ready for College? Thank you guys for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Great. I'm going to take this time now to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Ms. Jerisa Hawkins. She is a graduate of Hume Fogg and is currently a sophomore at Johns Hopkins University. Her major is molecular and cellular biology. Thank you, Jerisa, for being here today. Our next person is Miss Carly Freeman. Carly is actually, she was homeschooled, and now she is currently enrolled in Fordham University, Lincoln Center, and she is a senior, and her major is film and TV, and she actually has a minor in mathematics. So thank you, Carly, for being here today. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Jared Hall. He is a graduate also of Hume Fogg and is currently a junior at Middle Tennessee State University. And his major is music business. Thank you, Jared, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So, okay, guys, what I'm going to do, I have some questions that I'm going to ask you guys. I'm also going to be monitoring the chat just in case anybody jumps on to the Zoom call and has some questions. I will call your name out, get you to answer the particular questions. We ask that you keep them to 2 minutes apiece. And if y'all don't have any questions for me, we're going to go ahead and get started. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Good.
All right. Now, I have an opening question for you guys. Jerisa, what were your feelings and or thoughts when you found out that your campus was closing due to COVID-19?
I honestly wasn't surprised just because a lot of the schools around me had already started closing down. But it was the first time that I realized that COVID would actually be affecting me directly, not just something that I saw on the news or that was affecting people in nursing homes. Like, it had a direct effect on me and the way I lived my life.
Okay, thank you. All right, Carly, can you answer that same question?
Sure. So COVID affected me, like the way I felt about it, it changed. At Fordham, there were two big waves. There was the first wave, since we were in New York City, we had like cases in faculty, and so they closed us down briefly and sent us all home. So that was like, oh, this is weird. And I walked out of campus being like, this is going to be a museum. This is going to be the way it used to be, but I expected to come back a couple weeks later. And then when we actually closed, that's when I cried and was like, I didn't say goodbye to any of my graduating friends. That was the main thing that was sad for me.
Wow, I'm sure that was hard. Wow. Okay, Jared, same question.
So for me, my experience, I'm an RA, a resident assistant on campus at MTSU, and I was still up there until school actually closed completely, like for the semester.
Oh,
so
wow.
We had started like the quarantine, I think mid-March, and until I think it was May 15th, I was still on campus, just like making sure people who couldn't get home as soon as everybody else were okay. Just really weird. It was just always a ghost town on my campus. It was quiet. I would just walk around and just like hear the birds chirping. So it kind of weighed on me like mentally and emotionally like the first month. And after a while, it just kind of was like, okay, if this is how things are going to be, okay. And then when I moved back home afterwards, I was like, oh, we're going to go back again into this. So it's just been kind of weird. That's my best word for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I know, okay, when all this started, you went from in-person classes to now you're going to have to do your classes virtually. You did your classes virtually. So I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask you guys in regards to online classes versus in-person classes, okay? So Carly, what do you see as a major difference between online and in-person classes?
For me, the major difference for my arts courses was the discussion-based learning, because that either moved online for my larger classes. I had one TV theory class that only had 8 students, so we could continue doing that on Zoom, and it was like nothing had changed. My math courses pretty much stayed the same. The only thing that went different was lectures were online, but exams stayed the same. But for me, since I'm a math minor and an arts film and TV major, I had a completely different experience with the arts side that did a 180 turn, but the math basically stayed the same for me.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Jared, can you please answer the same question? If you need me to reread it, I can do that as well.
Okay, so basically the major difference that I noticed was really just the level of interaction with my classmates and professors. When you're in the classroom itself, you have a lot more to work with, to talk to people. You see things, you can actually put yourself in that place of work. And then when you're back in your room and you're divided by screens, it's very hard to just get adjusted to that. And interacting with your students or your friends in the class, or even getting the professor's attention or contacting him, could be a little more difficult. Not necessarily just doing it, but just that it feels so much more further away than it would be if you were in the classroom. So that's the main difference I would see. It's just the level of interaction with everybody.
Okay, thank you. Teresa, same question.
For me, it was just the lack of having a classroom, because at home there were so many more distractions than I would have on campus. So I wasn't just trying to do my work in a lecture hall like on campus. I was trying to do my work while my parents were cooking downstairs and my dogs were barking, and I still had to do something else for work. And so it was just a lot more to juggle.
Makes sense. Okay, great. All right, Jared.
Yeah.
How have you stayed in contact with your professors in an online format, like with their office hours, one-on-one meetings?
Honestly, just tons of emails. I'll send an email to make sure they got the email that I sent that week. You know what I'm saying? It was just email on top of email on top of email. And whenever you're in a Zoom call, because there are going to be a lot more Zoom calls you'll have with your professors with remote online classes, they'll ask does anybody have questions for me? Is anybody concerned about anything? Ask them, have you got my email in the Zoom call? Hey, my name is Jared. I sent you an email about this. That was my main way of just contacting them, just emailing, really. So.
Okay. All right, Teresa, same question.
Kind of the same thing as Jared, just emailing my professors a lot. Most of my professors still had office hours, and they would have a Zoom meeting and a link, so I could go to office hours that way. But you just kind of have to put in the effort to contacting your professors, because they're definitely not going to contact you first.
Okay. Carly, same question.
Going off of what you both already said, tons and tons of emailing. A lot, any question that I would have normally asked after class, the professor hey, when is this due? Or can I bring a calculator to the exam? I had to email those questions. But for questions about content, online office hours, if you can do online office hours, they're so much better than trying to email for long form questions how do you solve this problem? But you have to be proactive, because the online office hours, you have to ask for them. Sometimes they're already set up, but you have to really work to get the online office hour contact. It's not like you can just walk in someone's office like you used to be able to do.
Definitely, that makes sense. Thanks, guys. Okay. Teresa, in what ways can students get support in their classes while online, whether it's study groups, essay help, etc.? And then also, which ways have you utilized?
On my campus, we had a lot of resources like essay writing help, any tutoring groups, and a lot of those were pushed online after we left campus. So it was helpful just to go to their website and set up meetings with those advisors. But another thing I did was just having friends in the same class as you that you were in was really helpful, because chances are if you're up at 1 a.m. working on an essay or on a question, they're also up at 1 a.m. working on an essay or question, and you can kind of bounce ideas off of each other and help each other that way.
Great. All right, Carly, same question.
Going off what Jerisa said, having a study group that's students set up with your friends. I had one friend who did a final exam study group and just emailed the entire class. And so whoever showed up could. That was really helpful. Also, we had a lot of Slack communication for some of my classes where it was kind of like a discussion board and you could ask questions. But the main difference with Slack is your professor can see everything that you're writing. So like just be cognizant about what you're putting on something like Slack. Yeah, and then group text for math homework, highly recommend.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jared, same questions.
Same answer. Just
Okay.
having friends in like a group that you already kind of are good with, and if you don't make the friends, like somebody is definitely struggling with you, you can hear people how they're talking about in the class, and like in Zoom and calls and everything like that. It's like, yo, I kind of struggle with that same question you asked. You want to try to get together and work on that. So just having that group to work with, and a lot of professors also give out study guides for like exams and things. Have that group just go and break down the entire study guide before the test, and just like have all your notes and maximize your studying potential. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Also, next question, Carly, I believe you're up next. I think. Try to keep up with it. How have you maintained your focus when taking your online courses? I know there are a lot of distractions. So how have you maintained your focus?
For me, like focus has been the hardest thing. Especially like for me, focusing in class isn't that much harder. Like there's stuff out the window to watch, but for me, the main hard part is focusing on homework. So what I found myself having to do was like on my calendar, write something and pretend that it's due the day before it's actually due. So if my discussion post is due on Friday, I would put it on my calendar for Thursday. And then the other thing I would do, because I kept on getting distracted by the internet, I would turn off Wi-Fi whenever I had to like write something so that I couldn't go on YouTube and distract myself.
Okay. It's a good idea. Jared, same question.
Yeah, just making schedules. Like I have like a calendar on my phone, and I would write things like on paper, like with my notes. Just having that schedule and something simple to like go off like a plan to get things done really helped me keep my focus. And just if I didn't do it, I would just easily forget what I was doing at the hand, because I would try to do something like in that moment, and I'd be like, I could really clean my room right now, and then I would just clean my room for the next 2 hours and forget I had an exam or like an essay. So definitely make schedules and plan. That's
Okay. All right, Jerrisha, you need me to come back to you?
Oh no.
Okay.
It's just treating my online classes as I would my in-person classes. So if I'm going to a lecture on campus, I'm not going to spend the entire time on my phone or sleeping. So even though I can do that while I'm online, I try to make sure that I don't and just kind of keep that same amount of responsibility.